Hello folks, Dick Fairburn here. In several of my videos at the end I've said something like, we don't know where this country's headed, but it looks like a kind of dark days ahead. And in the last video, the interview with Dick Heine, I asked at the end, if you'd like to hear my thoughts about what's going to happen in this country over the next few months up to the election, let me know. And a lot of people expressed interest, and people outside the comments list have contacted me as well. So I've done a few of these analytical projects in my career. I'm certainly not a seer into the future, but I've come fairly close on some things. So I'm going to give you a three-part series that I'm calling Summer of 24, Prelude to War. If you want to hear what I have to say, stick around. I'll begin by saying what a lot of other people have said on TV and the mainstream media and elsewhere. I think we are facing the most important election in our country's history. We really are kind of standing on the edge of a cliff looking into the abyss. And the outcome of this election, possibly even what's going to happen before the election, may determine whether we have a country left. And I really think it's that serious. I think the potential for civil war is very real. Is it a Republican-Democrat issue? No, I don't think so, really, because a lot of the Republicans are as morally bankrupt as the Democrats, as far as I'm concerned. Is it a conservative versus liberals issue? Yeah, but I don't think it's quite that simple. Rich versus poor? Yeah, kind of. How about good versus evil? Yes. Those that think like me, and I think you probably are in that camp or you wouldn't be watching. Yeah, I think it's good versus evil. What it really is, in my opinion, is country folks versus city folks. And I'm going to show you a county election map from 2020. We talk about red states and blue states. In my look at it, there are really only two totally blue states. That is Massachusetts and Rhode Island. They don't have a single county that voted Republican. The only fully Republican state I notice on this is Oklahoma. Almost all of the other states have a mix of red and blue counties. But the overall tone of this country is red. Even in my People's Republic of Illinois, my home state, Cook County, the Chicago collar area, is blue. Downstate, it's Peoria, Decatur, Champaign, East St. Louis, but the rest of the state is red to one degree or another. And that's how most states are. Even the blue states have red areas. Even the red states have pockets of blue. I think this is a rift between the people who make things, grow things, kill things so that they have meat in those little plastic packages, transport things from one area to another.
All factors, the political division in America is that between city and countryside. And the countryside produces literally everything the cities consume, whether food, oil, electricity, in many cases, water, and the like.
So really, the bulk of the geography of this country is red. The reason liberals, leftists, Democrats are able to do what they do is that those blue pockets are so much more densely populated. They have at least half the population. But I think some of those people are also getting pretty fed up. I mean, this 3.5 years or so of Biden is amazing. I didn't think one person could do as much damage to the entire country as this guy has done. Of course, I don't really think he's running the country. I think somebody's running him. I mean, he barely knows where he's at most of the time. But the amazing thing is he's still competitive in the polls for all of his faults. When we look at the leftist, I kind of think that there's two major groups within those blue people in blue areas. I think about 90% of them are a little bit crazy and a whole lot gullible. And they buy the crap that's being fed to them by the 10% of the leftists who, they're crazy too, but they're rational and they have a plan. And if you think their ultimate goal is anything other than converting this country to a communist country, then you're a fool. They have essentially said it out loud. Okay, these are the Clintons, the Obamas, the Bidens, Susan Rice, John Kerry, Schumer, Pelosi. These are the radical left side of the blue contingent. They are not socialists. They are Marxists. Okay, Hillary wrote papers on the rules for radicals, and they want to fundamentally change the U.S. That's exactly what Barack Obama told us he wanted to do. Fundamentally change this country. He tried to burn the country down, in my opinion, on more than one occasion, but he couldn't get the fire lit. It wouldn't take. I think the problem is the 90% on the blue side, so many of them have become so lazy, they weren't willing to even get out and riot on his behalf. Now, we saw that change as time went on. Now, when I say communism, these people don't like Russian-style communism. I mean, that's why they tried to tie Trump to Russian interference and claim that the 2016 election was stolen because of Russian help. They don't like Russian-level communism, but they really love Chinese-type communism. And if you go back in these people's backgrounds, you'll find papers that they wrote in college or articles that they've written for left-wing magazines where they just idolize Mao Zedong and the way China has combined communism with a little bit of capitalism on the side, but still very controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. I want to tell you about a lesson I learned as a police investigator, mostly when I was doing some internal investigations, accusations against our own employees most of the time. What I found in a couple of cases were the allegations made against a given employee very quickly were found to be false. In other words, this person lied to try to get the employee in trouble. And I always wonder about the motivation. Why would you do something to that to, maybe somebody that works in your own agency? And so I kind of took a little time and I started looking at the accuser. Have they done something wrong? Is this an attempt to deflect attention from them? And yes, it usually is. And what I found, interestingly, over 2 or 3 different cases was the accusation they wrongly lodged was exactly what they had themselves been doing. The person in the city office said, well, one of your police officers in the past has taken lots and lots of time off that they didn't write down, so they're taking more time than they're entitled to for vacation time. Okay, well, you go back and look, and at times when the accuser said they weren't there, here's paper, they wrote tickets or they filed reports or they were here doing something on those days. So I know the accusations are false. So I started looking at the accuser, and what I found was that's what they were doing. They were taking days off and not writing it down as vacation time. They were bilking the system. And I talked to a couple of other investigators who'd seen the same thing, and I came up with a kind of a buzz phrase for this. What I say is, when you're dealing with liars, they accuse you of what they do. And I think that explains everything we see on the mainstream media. That explains most of the words coming out of the mouth of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and everybody else. They are telling you what they are doing or what they want to do by accusing us on the right of doing those things. One psychologist told me that one of the phrases they use for this is called reflection. That someone has, guilt feelings at some level about what they are doing, and so it's foremost in their mind. So when they try to lie about somebody else, it's that foremost thought in their mind that comes out of their mouth. So reflection explains these leftist politicians. If they say Trump will become a dictator if he's reelected, they want to be a dictator, and in fact, that's exactly how Biden is acting. If they say Trump will destroy democracy, that is their intent. They want to destroy democracy. They accuse Trump of stealing the 2016 election, through fraud because the Russians helped him. But most of us, probably 99% of us watching this video, are going to say, well, they stole the 2020 election from Trump through voter fraud and mainstream media and social media helping them. And make no mistake, they stole the election, and they intend to keep stealing elections. They intend to steal the 24 election. And I think they're going to go at it twice as hard as they did in 2020. And trust me, Illinois, in my opinion, is where voter fraud was invented. I worked with a guy who started out as a sheriff's deputy in Cook County, Chicago, back in the 60s. And he said when he first started, on election day, all the deputies had to be there a couple hours early in the morning. Everybody was given a case of pint bottles of Muscatel cheap white wine. Their job was to run the alleys and the back areas in the city of Chicago and find winos sleeping it off. They'd load them in their car, they'd haul them to a polling place, they would vote for them, and the polling people knew what was going on. So they would check the boxes for the drunk, take him back to the alley, give him a pint of Muscatel for his trouble, and go find another one. This has been going on in Chicago since they voted. And the Democrats have perfected it. Now, the Republicans have been caught at voter fraud as well. But if you want to compare, it's like 100 cases of Democrats for every one Republican fraud that we're able to find. They've done it, they perfected it, and they intend to keep doing it. So if they lose this election and Trump wins, they're going to start the war, not us. But make no mistake, in my opinion, they stole the 2020 election. And here's how they did it. We had a COVID pandemic going on. They used that as an excuse to do mail-in ballots in many, many states. Mail-in ballots are the easiest way in the world to commit voter fraud. They can print up exact duplicates of those ballots. They can fill dozens of them out with names of people that they pull off the list. And they go throw them in the boxes for the mail-in ballots, or they drop them in the mail by the hands full. There are a lot of videos out there showing the same person going to a drop box multiple times and dropping in multiple ballots every time. There is no way mail-in voting can be made fraud-free. In my opinion, it's impossible. We need to go back to election day voting. We need to go back to paper ballots, not machines which can be programmed. And legitimate absentee voting, which you have to get over a couple of hurdles to do. That system seemed to work for a long time. Other tools they used to steal the 2020 election. As near as I can calculate, about 29 states changed their election process, national candidate election process. And often it was done while the process of mail-in voting or absentee voting was already underway. Now, the U.S. Constitution specifies that the rules for a state's election of national officers has to be set by their legislature. In several of these states where they made changes, it was not done by the legislature. Secretaries of states, who generally oversee election in their state, they made those rules. In at least one case, a federal judge ordered rules for mail-in voting. Not the state legislators. So those changes were unconstitutional. Nobody really challenged them to a serious effect. What couple challenges were offered were quickly beaten down by liberal judges, which that's what we have to understand. For 50 or 60 years, they've been packing the federal courts, and often the state courts as well, with liberal judges. We have just barely seen a reverse of that from the appointments that Trump made, 3 on the Supreme Court and lots and lots of federal judges. So we've seen the court system turn around to a little bit more of a conservative leaning. The leftists don't like that. And they may have to go to war with the Supreme Court to try to put a stop to it, and they're willing to try that. Another tool, mainstream media was completely in the tank for Biden. They covered up everything he did that looked bad. They tried to attack Trump at every turn. They suppressed every bad news about Biden that they could, including Hunter Biden and his laptop and his income from the Ukraine, from China, everything else. Social media, at the specific request of the FBI, suppressed the story about Hunter Biden's laptop and his pay-to-play scheme with China, Ukraine, and anybody else he could get money from. Okay, so there we see a federal law enforcement agency weaponized against us that live and believe in the red conservative philosophy. That combination of things was just overwhelming. I think Trump probably won the election almost by a landslide, but their fraud was able to reverse that. Okay, they claim Biden got more votes than any candidate in history. Obama was the left's hero. I'm not buying it. I met Joe Biden in 1990 at a federal conference just outside of D.C. It was the U.S. Department of Justice was trying to change body armor standards, and Police Magazine sent me there to do an article on what was going on. And what the feds were doing was stupid. They were going to create better body armor, but it was going to be so stiff and heavy nobody could stand to wear it. Biden was there because the primary maker of the fibers used in police soft body armor, Kevlar, is the DuPont company, and DuPont is located in Delaware, his state. So he was there in support of DuPont. And he spoke a little bit, not on the main presentation plan, but he spoke on a couple of little side things. This guy impressed me as being a total political hack idiot. And this was when he was still in control of his cognitive abilities. I mean, it shows like spades now. This guy's an idiot. And that's probably all he ever was. This guy's a crooked politician. That's probably all he ever was. But the media, the social media, they're trying to build him up just as big as they did in 2020. So, what do I think we're going to see in 2024? In 2020, we had the riots, which were at least allegedly blamed on the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And there's no way to paint that and make it look good. If you read the autopsy, you will see that Floyd had no neck injuries whatsoever found by the autopsies. He essentially had enough fentanyl in him to kill a horse. Now, that guy kneeling on his neck or back for all those long minutes on the video doesn't look good. There's no way to make it look good. But George Floyd was a long rap sheet, multiple-time loser who probably just killed himself with fentanyl. But that triggered riots all over the country. It triggered the uptick of Black Lives Matter, BLM. And they fired up a lot of these riots. In Portland, Seattle, name the cities. I believe it was in Portland where a section of the city was actually taken over by the rioters for multiple days. The police didn't even go there. They ceded that part of the city to the rioters until they kind of got tired, and then the police were able to get back in there and take control again. We had mayors telling the police not to do anything about the rioters. Of course, major cities are almost completely controlled by liberal Democrats, the leftist side of the political equation. So they wanted them to riot. They wanted to scare the hell out of this country because they thought that would suppress the real vote and allow their fraud to work. And it did. So I think they're going to try the same thing. They haven't got George Floyd this time. So far, their attempt has been at universities with the Israel-Palestinian issue.
The level of organization that we're seeing in both of these encampments here and at Columbia, leaflets on how to protest, leaflets on how to commit civil disobedience, leaflets on what to do when you get arrested, leaflets on what to say to the police when they ask you. there is somebody funding this. There is somebody radicalizing our students, and our Deputy Commissioner of Counterterrorism and Intelligence will find out who it is, and we're going to be asking them some questions when we do.
And it looked to get pretty serious for a while. It was never really that violent, but the universities, I think, got scared off by the attacks calling them anti-Semites, and so they called the police and they put a stop to it. Okay, that's the first one. That's like Obama trying to start riots and they didn't catch. They'll come up with more ideas. They will come up with a cause of the day, and they will attempt to get those riots going nationwide as much as they can again this summer. The leftists will continue every possible legal attack or every possible prosecution of Donald Trump. This is already underway. To prove how fluid our situation is, in the process of filming and editing this, I had to stop and refilm some material because we were just made aware of the New York trial of Donald Trump. He was found guilty on all 34 counts against him. So far, I don't think this is enough to trigger any major changes in the progression of what's going to happen this summer. But time will tell. If they try to physically lock him up over this and keep him from campaigning, all bets could be off. But to get this up to date to the minute, Trump was just convicted, and we will see how that affects the outcome. The one interesting thing I heard on Fox News very shortly after the conviction was that his website for donations had blown up. So I think the rebound effect from this is going to surprise the Democrats. I don't think this is going to help them. I could be wrong. They tried to keep him off the ballot in several states. The Supreme Court pissed them off and put a stop to that. They said you cannot claim he was an insurrectionist and is therefore not fit to be on the ballot. The flip side is kind of interesting. In Ohio right now, Joe Biden will not be on the ballot in Ohio because the Democratic National Convention is scheduled at a date that is after Ohio's requirement to identify the name of the candidate. So Ohio, the governor called a special session of their legislature to try to change that law, to extend that deadline to make sure that Biden got on the ticket. The House passed it, the Republican Senate stopped it, and then, interesting way they stopped it, they attached a rider which said no one may donate to a political campaign in Ohio that is not a U.S. citizen. Because apparently they've had problems with people from other countries sending money in to foster campaigns in Ohio. That seems like a pretty reasonable thing to ban. Democrats are the ones that are getting that outside money, so they don't want to ban it, so their legislature's tied up. So now the Democratic National Committee just said yesterday, well, we will hold a phone vote, a conference call, and we will vote him in as the candidate before the Ohio deadline, and then we'll just do it as a formality at the convention. Okay, so typical leftist Democrat. If the rules don't favor us, we will ignore them. If we can't ignore them, we'll just go around them. That's the way they do business. That's why they despise the Constitution, because it limits what they can do. Because the Constitution was written as a limit on federal government power. It hasn't worked because the federal government, I think, has grown way beyond what the founders could imagine. But it has been held back to a large degree from what it really could have become. They want it to go all the way. They want the federal government to be God here, which is communism. Okay, after they stole the election of 2020, I think their plan is to further perfect voter fraud so that they will never again lose a presidential election. So they think that Biden is a shoo-in because they control the system to the degree that they can determine the outcome. Now, if the time comes that the logical ones, the 10% of the leftists who are diabolical and really have a long-range plan for this, I think if they realize Trump is going to win bigger than they can commit fraud to overcome him, There is nothing they will not do to stop Donald Trump. He is the antithesis of everything they believe in. And here's why I think they hate him so much. I think the extreme Democrat, these are the 10% that are not just gullible and follow along. These are the ones who are leading those who follow along. I think they had a plan. They figured if they could have 16 unbroken years of presidency, they could fundamentally change the country. 8 years of Obama, followed by 8 years of Hillary Clinton, and this country would never be the same. The Constitution would probably be gone. We would be into at least a communist light type of government. They would control who ran, and they would control who got elected. Well, they got their 8 years of Obama, but when Hillary got there, she was so unpopular, and Trump represented so much of what most of us were sick of, he whooped her butt. And their grand plan went down in flames. That is why they cannot allow Trump to get back in there, because he may finish the destruction of their plan. He may save the country. They have to stop it at any cost. What would they do? Well, if Biden looks too weak to win, which I think he's already at that point, what might they do? They could try to replace Biden as the Democratic candidate. They may even get to the point where he will request that, my health is just so bad, I can't continue. We're going to need to change to somebody else. I don't think they want to go with Harris because she's just too stupid and unpredictable. They could try to do it at the convention. Most of the states are not going to change the name that's already officially on their ballots. Unless he dies, maybe they would make that happen. And if you think he dies of other than natural causes, don't hesitate to think that they'll help him. I'm not sure they're going to be able to change him in all 50 states, D.C. and the territories and everything else. So that may not be a viable plan, but if they get desperate enough and that's all they've got, they'll try that. They may attempt to delay or postpone the election through legal means, such as the riots have got to a point where the country's just not safe. It's not safe to try to have election day. They researched this idea extensively in 2020 because they thought Trump would use it. There is really no legal way to postpone an election unless they get it passed by Congress and signed by the president. Well, I don't think they're going to get it passed by the House. So there's no legal way really to delay this election. But could they, by extra legal means, attempt to delay or postpone the election? Yeah, if the Civil War starts early, and they start it. Then they could simply, by administrative fiat, under martial law, say, election's postponed, it's not safe, we'll reschedule it at a later time in another year when the country is back under control. Okay, if they do that, it's war. It may be civil war, it may be, maybe we'll call it the Second American Revolution, because that would be throwing off a tyrannical government. Or it could develop into World War III. We've got a couple of hot spots around the world right now. China wants Taiwan. Israel's trying to finish off Hamas. Russia wants the Ukraine. We're sitting on a bottle of nitroglycerin, politically. All right. What if Trump is elected by a clear margin? They will attempt to block the electoral college vote. Exactly what Trump tried to do. And while the media will tell you about how he was so terrible in trying to do that, they won't tell you that the Democrats have used the same thing against every Republican president elected since at least George W. Bush. They go in and raise hell in Congress and try to get the vote overthrown, the electoral college vote. They've done it every time. But of course, then they don't like it when Trump wants to try it. And if you think January 6th looked like a bad deal, I tell you, if they have to stop Trump from being sworn in, as I said, there is nothing they won't do. And you can rest assured, if the left does attempt to start some form of civil war to stop Trump from being sworn in, the mainstream media and social media will be 110% behind him. So this will be an overwhelming attack on the United States population to try to convince them that Trump stole the election, that we can't have him, that democracy will fail. All the things they intend to do, they will blame on him. Now, have a little good faith. So far, I think their plan isn't working. The attempts to keep Trump off the ballots in several states failed. It was struck down by the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court has struck down several things in the last year or two that the Democrats despise. We've seen attacks on Alito. We've seen attacks on Clarence Thomas, trying to get them to recuse themselves on cases or trying to get them impeached. That kind of attack will just go crazy. They are at war with the Supreme Court. Ultimately, they would love to pack it with a lot more liberals, but they're going to have at least 4 years of a sensible president to have any hope of doing that. Any day now, today or tomorrow even, the Supreme Court could grant him at least partial immunity from some of these prosecutions. And the lawyers who listens to the oral arguments before the Supreme Court on that case, they think that they will probably grant him some level of immunity. If that happens, then the left will be even more filled with hate for the Supreme Court. The polls out there, if the ones you can believe, are trending toward Trump, and sometimes they're trending in a big way. He seems to be gathering votes from the black community, the Latino community, females, suburban females. All of these groups are going towards Trump in a much larger way than they did in 2020. So that's a positive. When I mentioned what the Supreme Court has done, in the last few years, they've struck down several of the left's holy grails. Mandated abortion was thrown back to the states. Affirmative action was knocked down. Racially drawn congressional districts has been stopped in a couple of different ways. Gun control and concealed carry bans have been knocked out. So all the stuff the left wants to try to grab total control of this country, the Supreme Court has been butting heads with them. They're not happy campers. And when they get that mad at the Supreme Court or Trump or anybody else, there's nothing they won't do. We've seen that before. So if the controllers of the leftist movement, that 10% that are diabolical and rational and planning, if they come to the conclusion that Trump is going to win and win big, then we may see the Civil War kick off even before Election Day. That may be the only way the only attempt they can come up with to try to stop him from becoming the president again. And the interesting thing is they think they can start a war like that and win. They think that law enforcement and the military will be their tools to put down the stupid hicks that live out in those red areas. I don't think local law enforcement is going to side with them, at least not universally. It may in the cities. Federal law enforcement, hey, they've got it. I think they have weaponized it already, virtually every branch, especially the FBI and the ATF. The military remains to be seen. You got full-time military, all the branches, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. I think senior commanders in those groups have been weaponized. They're going for woke stuff. They're changing. Fort Bragg has become Fort Liberty. Fort Benning is going to have its name changed. It's just, they're going for this leftist woke crap in a big way. But I think when you get out of the Pentagon and get down to field commands and field rank and file enlisted and NCOs, I'm not sure they're going to help the left take over this country. Certainly not to the degree that the left trusts. They think they give orders and by God they'll be followed. I don't think so. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more as we go along. So that's a question. We'll think about this and I'll answer them in my opinion is in the next video, number 2. Will law enforcement and will the military follow the leftist orders if they try to lock down and take over this country? Would the left resort to a full-blown Bolshevik revolution to try to turn this country communist. That'll be part 3. Folks, thank you for watching. I ask you to subscribe, comment, like, send this to all your friends. I think I've got a large enough subscription base out there now that you can push this stuff out if you agree with me. If you don't, by all means, tell me what you think in the comments. I expect to get some real scathing comments. Maybe before I'm done with these 3 things, YouTube may shut me off because I'm going to say things they don't want to hear. But thank you for watching clear to the end of this video. Part 2, I'm going to talk about what that Civil War might really look like in the United States if it happens before or after the election. And then in part 3, I'm going to say, what if all these other worldwide events coalesce and we find ourselves in World War III? And that's a thought we don't want to have, but I think we have to look at it. So thank you for viewing. Thank you for following me as long as you have, and y'all be safe out there. Okay, we got them both here now. You ready? Bud got one. Ginger got one. Oh, she missed it. She usually gets them, doesn't she, Bud? Okay, girl, last one. You ready? You ready? Yeah! That's all there is till next time.